There's a fragile moment that most people never notice. A raised eyebrow, a passive-aggressive jab, a subtle accusation dropped in front of a crowd, and instantly the instinct kicks in. You feel the urge to speak, to defend, to clarify the record, to save your name, and in that moment you lower yourself. Most of us were taught from a young age that when someone misunderstands you, you must correct them. That if you don't speak up, they'll think poorly of you, they'll gossip, they'll twist the story, and so you spend your life chasing after every misunderstanding, every whisper, every distorted perception, without ever truly living. But Marcus Aurelius once wrote something deceptively simple in the middle of his private meditations. You have the power to not feel insulted. Not because he was too strong to be hurt, but because he understood this truth. An insult only has power if you allow it to reach you. When you react, you grant weight to their words. When you get angry, you hand them the very power you were supposed to protect. The first emotion is instinct, but the next move is your choice. And the true Stoic does not live by reflex, he lives by principle. Think about yourself. How many times have you found yourself exhausted, explaining your heart to someone who was never listening? How often have you wasted your energy trying to correct a narrative that was built to misunderstand you in the first place? And how often did you walk away from those moments, drained even though you said everything? Machiavelli would tell you, you stepped onto someone else's battlefield. Marcus would add, and in doing so you abandoned your post, your duty to remain unmoved. The truth is, no one is truly hurt by words, unless they believe they must be understood, they must be vindicated. But once you truly understand yourself, you no longer need others to. And what's more unsettling than someone being publicly attacked and staying silent? Not because they're afraid, but because they no longer play that game. Because their silence is not retreat, it is a position. If you're learning to hold your ground when the world demands your reaction, if you're learning to remain still in the face of provocation, then you've already stepped onto the Stoic path. Subscribe to True Stoic Way, and let's keep building the mind that cannot be shaken. There's a subtle trap built into every accusation, and most people fall into it without even realizing. It's not just the words that wound, it's the frame, the position you are placed into the moment you respond. Because the second you justify yourself, you've accepted the unspoken terms, that they are the judge, that you are the one on trial, that your value is up for debate. You may not mean to admit it, but you do. With every explanation, every clarification, every let me explain what I meant, you surrender something. And it's not just dignity, it's command. Machiavelli would point out that power belongs to the one who controls the frame. And when you allow someone to define the terms, to set the tone, to force you to react, you're not defending your honor. You're defending their narrative. You've already lost the center. This is where Stoic wisdom cuts even deeper. Because a Stoic doesn't just avoid the argument to appear strong, he avoids it because the argument was never necessary in the first place. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Let the rest speak. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic lives by principle, not perception. He doesn't move just because others demand motion. He doesn't speak simply because silence is uncomfortable. And most importantly, he does not explain himself to those who have not earned the right to question him. Ask yourself, who placed them in the seat of judgment? Why do their doubts deserve an answer? Why do you feel compelled to satisfy their curiosity? The hard truth is this: most people are not looking for clarity. They are looking for control. They want you to jump through their emotional hoops. They want you to dance in their theater of suspicion. And every time you try to clear things up, you only tighten the leash they handed you. But when you stand firm, unmoved by their need for explanation, you return to yourself. You exit their frame and re-enter your own. You're not here to satisfy their expectations. You're here to live by your convictions. That's the Stoic way. The more you explain yourself, the more would you give others permission to define you. But when you stop justifying and start standing, something changes. They begin to question whether they were ever qualified to judge you at all. If you're beginning to feel that shift, that subtle rise in inner strength, you're not alone. Subscribe to True Stoic Way and keep walking this path of quiet power. There's a reason most people can't stay silent when challenged, because deep down, they're still trying to win something. Approval, validation, the final word. But the Stoic man, the man who has trained himself to stand still, he's no longer chasing those small victories. He doesn't need to win the argument. He doesn't need to be liked in the room. He doesn't even need to be understood. He only needs to remain centered. Marcus Aurelius never advocated for passive silence. He embraced what can only be called immunity, a quiet, grounded state of mind where insults, gossip, or judgments don't penetrate, because they no longer register as relevant. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. Marcus Aurelius. In the office, someone throws shade at your ideas. In a relationship, someone accuses you of being distant. In society, someone labels you as too cold, too serious, too calculated. The masses will tell you to speak up, defend yourself. Don't let them say that. But the Stoic and the Machiavellian both understand something deeper, that by staying silent, you shift the power dynamic entirely. Machiavelli once implied, the truly powerful do not need to prove themselves. Only the weak are desperate to be heard. Because when you don't react, people start to fill in the blanks themselves. And here's the secret. They often overestimate you. They wonder, why didn't he respond? What is he thinking? Is he too confident to care? And just like that, your stillness becomes intimidation. Your silence becomes status. Your lack of reaction becomes the loudest thing in the room. But it's not about creating mystery to manipulate others. It's about no longer living to settle scores. You don't bite at every provocation because your peace is no longer negotiable. You don't win the small fights because you've already won the war inside. When your silence speaks louder than their accusations, you've already claimed something most men never will. True command over yourself. And if you're starting to feel the power of stillness rise within you, then you've found your path. Subscribe to True Stoic Way, where the noise ends and the discipline begins. Stay with me. This next part goes even deeper. Every provocation is a test. A silent wager placed by someone who wants to know, can I move him? Whether it's a snide remark, a backhanded compliment, or a direct insult, it's never just about the words. It's about control. They want to see if you'll flinch, if you'll crack, if you'll perform for them. But here's what most people never realize. The provocation isn't about you. It's about them. Their insecurity, their need to assert dominance, their addiction to reaction. Because when you respond, especially emotionally, you validate them. You tell them, without words, yes, what you said matters. You have that kind of power over me. And now they own the moment. But if you don't respond, if you simply hold the line, a strange thing begins to happen. They start questioning themselves. Was I too harsh? Did I misread the situation? Why isn't he reacting? Did I go too far? Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to face their own motives, their own tone, their own emotional instability. And few people are ready for that kind of reflection. Because the truth is, they weren't looking for dialogue. They were looking for a rise. And when they don't get it, they feel exposed. The angry man is the one who has already lost the battle with himself. Stoic teaching. This is the game behind the game. They poke, prod, and provoke, not to discover your truth, but to confirm their leverage. Don't give it to them, because when you remain composed, when you choose silence with purpose, something beautiful happens. Their performance collapses. Their confidence crumbles. And suddenly it is they who appear too emotional, too reactive, too small, not because you shamed them, but because they shame themselves in the absence of your reaction. There is power in letting others reveal who they are without saying a word. When you master the pause, when you stop feeding their hunger for reaction, you stop being predictable. You start being formidable. If you're starting to feel the difference, keep going. Subscribe to True Stoic Way and learn to win without saying a thing. Next, we sharpen the blade even further. Machiavelli understood a timeless truth. In the game of power, you don't block the attack. You don't swing back. You stand still and let your opponent walk into their own mistake. Because nothing unnerves the emotionally reactive like someone who refuses to play the game. You don't defend. You don't retaliate. You simply don't move. And in that stillness, something deadly happens. The one who came at you, confident and loud, now finds themselves on stage, alone. They expected a fight. Instead, they're met with quiet indifference, and so they do the only thing they know. They keep attacking. They post again, they repeat themselves, they seek allies, they escalate. But each move they make in your silence is a confession, a window into their obsession. And obsession always exposes weakness. Marcus Aurelius said it best: nothing betrays a man's character faster than actions he cannot control. Your refusal to respond doesn't just protect your peace, it creates a mirror. And that mirror reflects back everything they were hoping to hide: their insecurity, their need for validation, their hunger for relevance. You didn't crush them. You didn't embarrass them. You simply gave them space to do it themselves. This is not passive, this is precise. This is the blade of silence, held steady, not to cut, but to let the other man fall on it, and they will. Because those who act from impulse eventually reveal everything they hope to conceal. It's not about vengeance, it's about leverage. About making your presence so composed, so untouchable, that others unravel in the presence of your restraint. There's nothing colder and nothing more powerful than silence that lets someone collapse under the weight of their own performance. You don't need to fight fire with fire. You let it burn itself out. If that's a discipline you're starting to practice, then keep building with us. Subscribe to True Stoic Way and master the art of letting others expose themselves. Next, we draw the line between strength and true immunity. Strength is what most men chase. They want to be seen as solid, unshaken, able to endure pressure. And yes, there is honor in being strong. But strength by its nature still resists. It still reacts. It still flinches before it fights back. Immunity, however, is different. Where strength absorbs the blow and remains standing, immunity makes the blow irrelevant. It is the difference between a man who endures the storm and a man who has built a world where the storm never touches him in the first place. Stoicism isn't about becoming tough in the face of insult. It's about becoming unreachable by insult. It is not the hardness of armor, but the stillness of air. Ungraspable, unbothered, utterly uninvested in the games of small minds. A strong man might hold back his anger, but a stoic man no longer feels anger as something to suppress. A strong man may need silence to calm down, but a stoic chooses silence because nothing inside him was disturbed to begin with. This is where most people confuse discipline with detachment. They believe that not reacting is an effort, a controlled suppression of some boiling rage. But for the Stoic, silence isn't effort, it's nature. Stillness isn't strategy, it's state. Because once you've trained your mind to stop seeking victory, stop craving recognition, stop needing to be seen, you transcend the very triggers that used to pull you into conflict. Machiavelli understood power as something seized and protected, but Marcus Aurelius reveals a deeper truth. The greatest power is the one that does not need to be proven because it has nothing left to defend. You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to trouble your soul over things outside your control. Marcus Aurelius. And so, true immunity begins where effort ends. It is not forged through aggression, but through clarity. Not earned through dominance, but through dignity. Not shown in public, but held quietly in private, where no audience watches, and yet your posture never collapses. To become immune is to become inaccessible, not through distance, but through elevation. You are not cold, you are calm. You are not indifferent, you are anchored. And those who try to provoke you will eventually exhaust themselves trying to shake a mountain that does not move. There's a point where silence is no longer just strategic, it becomes sacred. When you've tasted that kind of inner immunity, the world begins to change. Not because it became quieter, but because your mind no longer reaches for its noise. If you're walking toward that stillness, stay with us. Subscribe to True Stoic Way and keep rising above the reach of the world. Ahead, we uncover what kind of reputation a man like that truly carries. The world will tell you to be good, be agreeable, be kind, be humble, smile more, explain yourself, soften your tone, apologize for being misunderstood. And if you do it long enough, if you bend far enough, they might even say you're a good man. But a good man is only good until the crowd changes its mind. A good man is praised until the praise becomes inconvenient. A good man is expected to explain himself when others feel uncomfortable, not because he's wrong, but because he refuses to bend further. Being good in the eyes of the many too often means being compliant, harmless, easy to read, easy to control. But you're not here to be agreeable. You're here to be immovable, because a man who is respected doesn't need to be liked, and a man who is truly strong is never desperate to be understood. Machiavelli put it clearly, without apology: it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. And fear in this context is not terror, it is weight. It is the feeling someone has when they realize your silence carries more authority than their shouting. It is the caution others feel when they know that speaking your name demands reverence, not approval. That you are not someone who performs to please the crowd, but someone who lives so close to principle that no crowd could move you. This is where Stoicism and Machiavellian realism merge. Because Marcus Aurelius didn't live for applause. He didn't campaign to be seen as good. He trained himself to be just, regardless of whether the world noticed. He wrote not to be admired, but to remain disciplined in solitude. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. And that is what builds a reputation carved in stone, not in praise, not in popularity, but in principle. Not in what others say about you, but in what they dare not say. A strong reputation does not seek protection. It is the protection. It means you don't explain rumors. You don't chase down gossip. You don't plead your case. Because those who try to drag you down quickly realize that your identity isn't made of paper. It's built like bedrock. There comes a moment when the world no longer asks, "Is he good?" but instead whispers, "Be careful, he doesn't waver." If you're starting to build that kind of presence, a name that speaks for itself even in silence, then you're building a legacy the Stoic way. Subscribe to True Stoic Way and let your reputation be forged by action, not approval. We're almost there. Now comes the final transformation. The most feared man in any room is never the loudest. He is not the one who lashes out, defends himself, or explains his every move. He is the one who does not speak at all, because he does not have to. There is something unnerving about a man who won't play the game, who doesn't flinch when accused, who doesn't rush to correct the record or soften a confrontation. His stillness isn't passivity. It's presence. It's the quiet dominance of a person who knows exactly who he is and knows you'll feel it without needing to be told. This is where most people misunderstand silence. They think it comes from fear, from indecision, from doubt. But true silence, Stoic silence, is not emotional, it's philosophical. It doesn't come from apathy, it comes from alignment. It's the kind of silence that arises only when a man has so fully ordered his values, his principles, and his self-perception that there is nothing left to defend. He doesn't respond because the conversation isn't worth his clarity. He doesn't explain because his conscience is already clean. And he doesn't react because nothing inside him is shaking. By now, you've likely encountered men like this. Not many, but a few. They walk into a room and speak little, yet everything around them bends. They're criticized but never collapse. They're misunderstood but never rush to fix it. And without ever raising their voice, they become a symbol of discipline, of authority, of dangerous self-control. Their life becomes the message. Their silence becomes the armor. And their stillness becomes a kind of myth, because most people can't comprehend how someone could live that far above approval. You're not here to win every exchange. You're not here to argue your way to peace. You're not even here to be understood by everyone. You're here to live in a way that doesn't require explanation, to build a presence so deeply rooted in value that reaction feels like regression, to become not a man who wins debates, but a man who no longer needs to enter them. That is the final evolution, not a man who has power, but a man who has become it. This is the path. It begins with instinct, the quick tongue, the clenched jaw, the need to respond, to explain, to correct. But somewhere along the way, you pause. You see the game behind the words, and you step out of it. You stop defending. You stop explaining. You stop seeking validation from those who never earned the right to question you. And in that moment, you start to shift from someone who reacts to someone who defines the frame, from a man constantly dragged into noise to one who lives in silence so deep it becomes presence, from strength to immunity, because your power no longer depends on being right. It rests in being unmovable. Your silence is no longer a tactic. It's a reflection of who you've become, not a man untouched by life, but a man who has been tested and has nothing left to prove. So look inward. Ask yourself, are your words driven by fear or chosen by principle? Do you speak because you must or because you're still trying to be heard? If your stillness has started to feel heavier than your anger once did, if your silence carries more meaning than your old explanations ever could, then you are not falling behind. You are rising quietly, but undeniably. If you're learning to hold silence like a sword not yet drawn, if you're stepping away from the need to be seen and stepping into the weight of simply being, then you're walking the right path. Subscribe to True Stoic Way and continue building the kind of man who doesn't chase respect, he commands it.